What's going on, guys? Welcome to a solo episode of the You Can't Afford Me podcast. In 2024, I'm planning on doing a lot more of these. I want to crank out more content. There's a lot of stuff I want to discuss that I really can't get into when I just have a guest on the show. So I'm going to be selecting some topics, dive in. These are going to be brief episodes. I'm going to keep these under 15 minutes and just talk to you guys about some things with entrepreneurship, what's going on in my life, and hopefully you guys take some nuggets from this and are able to implement this into your life and into your business. So today's episode, I want to focus on a startup story. So a lot of people, and I feel like I've shared this story several times, but I'm going to dive deep into what it was like starting my first business. So let me paint a picture for you guys. I went to Longwood University. I dropped out of college at the junior level simply because I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and they weren't teaching me the things I needed to know to become an entrepreneur. Majoring in business at the time was learning how to go work for another company, not how to found your own business. So my parents, they would help me out with books and, laptops and stuff like that. But Sally Mae was in my name. And at the junior level, I realized, man, I'm going to have to pay back a crap ton of money. And if I really don't see myself using a degree, what's the point of going into further debt? So I rolled out. I will say this, on college, the relationships that I gained from going to university were instrumental in my entrepreneurial journey. So my very first business partner, which we're going to discuss today, that first business, was my fraternity brother in college. So I may have never been part of the startup with Richmond Bubble Soccer had I not attended Longwood University and met my fraternity brother. So to continue to paint the picture, after college, obviously I got to find some way to make money. I fell into the mental health field. So my first job was at the Boys and Girls Club. This is at Lynchburg, Virginia. And I was making a whopping $7.25 an hour. Tough times. A lot of Little Caesars pizza, a lot of PB&J. That's all I could afford. And I knew that was food that I could stretch out. So luckily, in my adult years, I've always been ambitious. So I was able to work my way up. I went from Boys and Girls Club to becoming a behavioral specialist in the school system. Now, traditionally, you look back on this now, these jobs that I had, you always had to have a degree in order to do this. But somehow I found a way to finesse the system. I always had a few more years of experience that in their eyes equated to a degree. So I was allowed to continue to work in this field. So fast forward, another 8 years. Eventually got to the point where they said, you know what? We don't care how much experience you have. You can't work with this population unless you have a degree. So then all of a sudden, I'd spent the last 8 years of my adult life in this profession. This was the only way I knew how to make money. And all of a sudden, somebody's telling me, the state's telling me, you can't do this anymore. So I went into beast mode, and I found a mental health agency that I really want to work for. Explaining them the situation, my degree, but they're like, we're going to figure out some way to get you here. So they ultimately brought me on as a project manager. Had no idea what a project manager was. He told me the salary. I said, sounds good. I stayed up the entire night researching what does a project manager do. Had that job for about 2 years, and at the tail end of that, I could see that my job would be dissipating pretty soon. So like most normal people, I went to dust off my resume. And something in my spirit stopped me at that moment and said, you know what? You've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. If not now, then when? I didn't have a girlfriend, so I didn't have a wife, didn't have kids. The only responsibility I had was keeping a roof over my head and putting something in my belly. So I said, you know what? This is the time. I can manage a high level of risk at this moment because it's just me. So my business partner, and I think he'll tell you the story a little bit different, but Kyle Taylor, my business partner, has actually been on the podcast in season 1. Go back and listen to that episode. He ultimately had the idea. He had a baseball league that he had started. was just getting into bubble soccer. I mean, like, he was just about to buy the equipment. And I was intrigued because he was a real estate agent, but he had this baseball league, and he told me the amount of money he was making and the little amount of work that he was having to do to keep it going because he hired other people to run the business for him. I said, man, you got to put me on game. I got to be part of this. So luckily for me, he agreed, said, let's be partners. Let's run this thing together. Keep in mind, guys, I had $0. Zero. He had capital. So what we ended up working out was he brought the capital to the table for us to do everything we need to do. So that's purchasing the equipment, getting a website up and running, email addresses, phone number, LLC paperwork, all that. Probably an initial cost of around $5,000. And the deal we made was I would put in sweat equity, and it would equate to the amount of money that he put in. And I think we figured it was somewhere around 4 to 6 months of work me putting in that put us at even tilt. And then after that, we split profits 50-50. Keep in mind, at this moment, I'm still working that full-time job. And when I went to my boss and told him, you can't afford me, which a lot of you don't know, that's the reason for the name of this podcast is You Can't Afford Me. I actually wrote a book on it years ago as well. You can find it on Amazon, You Can't Afford Me. And guys, that was a rough time because when we first started the business, yeah, it was making money, but we weren't paying ourselves anything, which I think a lot of people don't understand that when you start a business, you initially are not going to be able to pay yourself. So what I did to supplement that income, Uber had just started in my area. So I was able to go out on the weekends. I could go out on a Saturday night and clear $500. I don't think you can do that today, but there were so few drivers and so much demand that it worked out in my favor. So that kind of supplemented my income stream for the time being. Things eventually got to the point where when I quit my job, I had to look at that system and say, you know what, I got to pay myself something. Had a conversation with my business partner, said, okay, here's what we can afford to pay ourselves, and kind of kept things rolling from there. But in those initial months, I'll never forget. I know I've probably shared this story on various platforms. I know a lot of you listening to this, you may be homeowners, you're a little bit higher up than you used to be, but at some point we all used to rent apartments. I had a roommate, one of my best friends, still to this day. And I went to him and I said, look, man, the money ain't coming in. I ain't got it. I'm going to have to move out. And I didn't have money to move anywhere else. My credit score was torn up. Like, I probably wouldn't have got approved for an apartment by myself, even if I could have afforded it. And I made a game plan. I told him I'm sleeping in my car. I'll get on Craigslist, put up an ad. I'll find your roommate and have somebody in here in the next couple of weeks. And guys, I'm scrambling. I'm trying to figure out how am I going to make this work. And let me also add this to the equation. My parents live 2 hours away. I easily could have picked up the phone and told them what was going on, and they would have let me move back in the house. But I've always operated with the mindset of, if I live in Virginia and my family was in California, what would I do? I'd have to figure it out on my own. So that's always been my mentality. I didn't want to have to rely or fall back on somebody. I'll figure it out on my own. And there was a company that we had given a quote to months prior to. And it was a convoluted story because I actually started up like 3 businesses within 4 months of leaving my job. But then what was now Enzo Media Firm was Anderson Consulting. I quoted somebody on services months ago. And then that day where rent was due. I mean, they don't care if you got 99.9% of the money. If you're a penny short on rent and that last day is due, they're kicking you out. And a gentleman called me. And it's funny, I can't remember the business. I can't remember his name. I just remember this moment. A gentleman called me and said, Mr. Anderson, you may not remember me, but you gave my company a quote several months ago. We weren't ready to do business then. We're ready now. Who do I write the check to? And I said, bruh, don't go anywhere. Stay exactly where you are. Don't put that check in the mail. I need that today. I made a beeline to where he was at, got the check, deposited in my bank account. It was more than enough that I needed to cover for my portion of rent. And guys, I kid you not, from that moment on, my trajectory went up. And to me, this is the major lesson of this story. To me, that was God testing me, saying, do you really want to be an entrepreneur, or are you playing like you want to be an entrepreneur? Like, I'm going to put you in a position to do this, but I need to test you. I need to see if your gut's really here, because I could have easily gone back and gotten a job somewhere else. Easily. With the skill set and the experience I had, somebody else would have hired me. I would have found a position. But I knew deep down in my core, this is what I was meant to do. And because I made the plan to sleep in my car, because I contacted several friends who lived in different parts of town and told them my situation and said, hey, is it cool if I put some clothes at your house here? Is it cool if I put some clothes here? I kept my $10 a month gym membership at Gold's Gym because I knew I'd at least have somewhere to shower. Because I made that distinctive plan, I made it clear that this is what I was willing to do to chase my dream. I believe the universe, God, rewarded me for that. So for those of you that may be at a crossroads right now with your business, you're thinking about taking that leap of faith. And let me also say this. The risk tolerance I had then is way different than what I have now. So if you're in a situation where you're married, you have kids, people are depending on you, it's very difficult to just be able to take that leap of faith. That's why I tell everybody you need to have a side hustle, because you can have something that you're building on the side outside of your full-time job that when you need to make that transition, it's going to be a lot easier to do. Plus, if you're married, you may have a spouse that's, bringing in another income that you guys can both live off of. So I don't give this advice out lightly. Understand the situation I was in when I did this. But at some point, if you're at that crossroads, you're going to have to take some sort of risk. You're going to have to look at your situation and say, there's never going to be a time where your side hustle is going to exceed your full-time income by 20 grand. And it's like as easy as looking at a spreadsheet and being like, oh, well, I made my numbers. Time for me to go put in my 2-week notice. It's probably not going to have people done that before? Absolutely. But don't take an outlier and make that the norm. Majority of people, that does not happen to. When you make that leap of faith, your income's going to drop by 30, 40, 50, 60%. Easily. But if you know this is what you are meant to do, one thing I can promise you guys at the end of this, so sweet. It's so sweet waking up to your purpose every single day. Now, there still are trials and tribulations. Don't get me wrong. I have my problems and fires that I have to put out on a daily, if not weekly basis. But the fulfillment that I get, along with the cash flow, the fulfillment I get of being in control of my future, doing what I want to do when I want to do it. Like the other day, school got delayed. My oldest daughter's in preschool. So my wife had to take her there, register her and my son for the fall. My son also had a doctor's appointment. Because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm in control of my schedule and I have staff, I was able to leave the office, go take my son to his doctor's appointment. If I was working for somebody else, that would have been a headache, a nightmare. So there is a major rainbow at the end of this. But the main reason I'm telling you guys this story is because you need to understand there's going to come a time where you have to make that leap of faith. And it's not going to be comfortable. Hope you guys got something out of this. I'm very much looking forward to our next interview. I don't even want to say it because I might mess it up. Stay tuned. Season 2 is going to be killer, guys. We are bringing you guys a ton of content. Also, make sure that you guys go to our new website, themrpreneur.com. Brand new website, brand new domain. I'm stoked about it. Check that out, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.